So just a quick check at where you are. This is the Quantifying Virtual Success session with Charlie and I. Just some quick housekeeping. Again, 25-minute presentation, Q&A at the end, moderator on standby for support. That's Julia Haas, our marketing director. We're going to take some Q&A through the chat icon. Your session will be open maybe 5 minutes after it ends to answer any questions. So I'll quickly introduce myself. Again, VP of Sales and Client Strategy, leading our virtual experiences offering. This may be the first time you're hearing from Charlie beyond moderators. So Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a program strategist here at Dursey in our client strategic services. My job revolves around trying to help people make informed decision making. So that's why you guys are all here. For our session, we'll be focusing on the analytics portion of understanding virtual events.
So the agenda for the session, we're going to overview the topic itself, what to measure and why. I'm going to talk about how you go about measuring things, just plugins, Google Analytics, things like that, some essential takeaways, and then we'll end with some Q&A. Before I get into kind of opening things up, Charlie, quick favor from you. If you could mute while I'm talking, I'll do the same. It should keep us a little better audio quality. Already better, so thank you. So topic overview. We've gotten a lot of questions about how do you quantify a virtual experience? And when we look at the Infinity platform, on the right, because there's some precedent, we already have a good sense of how you go about tracking and measuring live events, whether it's lead capturing software, tracking that lead in the sales cycle of your CRM system, third-party lead collection tools like our IQ platform. But what might be new to many of us in the audience is how you go about measuring virtual. One of the advantages of digital marketing and virtual is the fact that on a macro data sense, you can measure a lot. And it's almost to the point of not what to measure, or how do you measure, but what kind of stands out. So Charlie and I are going to talk about specific things to be measuring, and then I'm going to focus in on how you go about measuring it, perhaps on kind of a digital technical level, but something that everyone should understand at a minimum level. So first things first, in terms of just how you go about quantifying success with a virtual experience, these are some high points of things that we're seeing at the moment. First and foremost, increased reach is certainly a pro of virtual experiences. When you remove the barrier of travel, jumping on an airplane, paying for registration costs, everything else that comes with business travel, whether it's food and meal allocations, thanks to the pandemic, people are at home. Even if they're at work, they're not necessarily traveling, and they're more available to tune into a virtual experience. One of the things that we learned, especially in the healthcare and tech side of things, is the C-level is more accessible than it ever has been before because they're not flying all over the world doing their job. So increased reach is certainly something that, when it comes to quantifying success and like why do this, is something that we're seeing. Number two, and this is kind of part of the challenge, is we as marketers, whether it's on the event and exhibit side of things, or if you're a marketing director in charge of every marketing discipline under your company's watch, you rely on precedents to make decisions. You might be looking at the number of leads collected at last year's show. If you're doing a virtual experience for the first time, you don't have prior efforts to return, so you're kind of taking a leap of faith. That is what it is, but the good part is you can measure things not only instantaneously after the event, but often in many cases in real time. And we'll talk about how Google Analytics allows you to do that. And then one thing to kind of keep in mind, this is a nuance, especially for those of you on the trade show side, but your scope of measurement might vary across whether you're going to a show that's virtual, you purchased a sponsorship package, and you are now exhibiting as part of that virtual conference, or you're developing your own proprietary experience that you have entire control over. So we actually want to ask a poll question here, and we're curious where everyone lands. Is what you're looking to measure a proprietary event that you have complete control over, Or is it involved more in like a sponsorship package that's tied to a trade show that has gone virtual? For those of you in the healthcare space, ASCO was kind of the first example of this, where clients began to ask themselves, like, okay, I'm willing to support the association through this. What am I getting out of this from a measurement standpoint? So we're curious, your choices, is it a proprietary conference, sponsorship package, or both? Charlie, give me a sense of kind of what you're seeing there.
Hey guys, it's Julia. I actually can tell you that it's both by quite a bit. So sponsorship package is at about 30%, proprietary is at about 15 to 20, and both is quite a bit more. So you're seeing the investment in both right now.
Understood. Yeah, thanks, Julia. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I can tell you that measuring for a proprietary event is much easier because you get to kind of pick what you're measuring, versus as a sponsorship package, you're kind of at the mercy or subject to how that particular association made that show virtual. But definitely interesting to see that people are thinking of it in both ways. I'm going to turn it over to Charlie. He's going to kind of walk us through some things to measure and why it's important.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I think that part of the overall theme of all of this is, as you said, comparing it to something we may not have done. So we've already received some questions in the keynote about maybe what's the average time spent in a booth, or what if they don't go into the space, and it's all going to depend. So let's briefly talk about why we need to look at all of this in every aspect that we can, and that's why we're going to understand the why we would be measuring something. So if you're looking at average time spent, we need to understand what we're asking them to do in the booth. Are they perhaps virtually demoing a piece of equipment that they could become very intricate with? Look at all the components. That could take a lot of time, versus we have some material that is only 5 to 6 minutes. So if they're connecting with that, that's about the limit on what they're going to do. The other question is to look at why they're bouncing off the material. When we look at the attendees after the fact, maybe there's some patterns we can see on the types of people that were connecting with the material and the types weren't. We do know that buying cycle is part of that issue, but it could be a case where we are just not providing the information that certain people need. So we're going to go through some of the things that you can measure step by step and understand the why of it. So a big one that we see is the number of registrations, which can be affected totally by, as Rick mentioned, kind of the reach. If you're offering a virtual event for free, whereas going somewhere might have cost money, you're going to see a rise in that. You're going to see the ease of attendance. You're also going to see a lot more internal people perhaps attending. So what we can do with that number is understand how we promote our event, how it goes out to the many people to talk about the fact that we are doing it and people are going to be together to understand these questions. But also it's going to help us understand the demographics of people that are interested in this and what they are expecting to learn. Rick mentioned in an earlier session about the different avenues you can use to gain registration. It's going to be merging systems together. So how we track that, whether you're using your CRM system, your outbound marketing system, maybe for us it was our housing and registration system, could be a lot of different systems you guys are combining to get that registration number. So when you're doing that, make sure you can track it correctly so that your promotions are accurate, you're both internally and externally, who you're reaching out to and what you can expect from upper level management. The next thing we're going to talk about is number of visitors. It is really going to help you with your outbound marketing campaign, because the people that actually take the time to show up and engage with the material is going to be a lot different from those people who just registered. So what is most important for something like this is having a thought out plan on how you could share material with people after the fact. What sorts of information you couldn't provide in a digital platform or was maybe too expensive or didn't have the time to do, and how you're going to provide those answers for people going past the event itself. It maybe depends on how you're going to leave it be live for a while, but also who you plan on getting to attend versus who didn't attend but maybe registered. When we're looking at something like engagements and dwell time for, again, things like videos, stations, a booth if you build it, that is a great way to evaluate the overall performance of your virtual event. Hopefully the platform you have and use will do a lot for this, but then working with a partner, working within your team to say, what is our actual goal? Is it to get everyone to see this video or just the people that need to see this? I can help you understand if people were satisfied with that. We're going to have a feedback survey, but we also will look at how people stayed in sessions and things like that to understand if they were important. It can also help with the content promotion you use after the fact. So you can see the AACR is actually doing 2 virtual sessions this summer instead of their normal face-to-face show. After they had their first one, they're promoting their second one. So you can see numbers like registrants and some of the things that they had during their content. But the big numbers they keep talking about are how many people went to these top 3 sessions, over 20,000 at each of them. They're going to then promote the fact that those sessions were of interest to most of their colleagues. That's a big point for them to say, here's what we're trying to accomplish. So something that kind of seems broad of the 35 million impressions that they had over the 4 days, it seems like a very impressive number, but it has no context. So when you're talking about engagement, you need to give people the context so they can see exactly what was most important for your group. It's going to help you promote for future events. Breakout sessions interactions is really important too. We want to know what types of questions people have. Dwell time is important, but that dwell time might be existing on people who don't have the answers they need. So it'll help you answer questions for people that are important to you that attended your event. But then as you move forward and you keep your event live for a time period, or you are doing anything else in the future for a live event, it'll help you shape that content and address things so that you have better questions answered and you can kind of create a better content for your group. One of the ways that we're doing it is each one of our sessions, we will track the number of engagements. We'll kind of know who's been in the session. And as I've done previously, we're going to capture all those questions, even if we can't answer them in the session. It'll help us make sure we have good material on our resources page, as well as we're responding to people and what they really care about. Transactions performed. So if you have something in your event that allows for a follow-up, such as a follow-up meeting scheduled or a different transaction, the way that you measure that, that is going to really show a return on investment. Questions and engagements are one thing, and all those people that have come to attend, those are very important. But when you have somebody that goes that next step, shows you kind of where they are in their decision-making process or what they need from you, it can really help you report back internally about, here's exactly what we received from this. You know, we think about that sometimes when we talked about face-to-face meetings, people say it really matters about how many people we meet, how many contracts we get signed. You know, when we scan leads, that's one thing, but transactions are a different thing. So you can do that digitally as well. If that's something important to you, set up space in your platform to do it. The last one I'll cover is kind of the after the fact, how many documents and different documents were downloaded by different groups of people. So that content, we can see that if there's content that's not being really used, either all those questions were asked or it's just not relevant for most of the audience that you're reaching out to. It also really helps the sales conversation or just a relationship conversation after the fact. We kind of get an understanding for what they understood during your session, what they've been reading on their own, what questions they might have. So instead of anybody going to reach back out and having it kind of be a blank stare of, well, what did you think? You can talk specifically about the certain things that they may have questions about because you knew what they interacted with, you knew what they downloaded. It also gives you a good time period. So this is a screenshot of kind of our resources and materials page. I think it's been updated since then, or you might be seeing just a different portion of it. We're not using it as just this indication to say, okay, which one is most popular? We're using it to understand what we can help you guys with. So if there's one session that had the most attendance, that's one thing. If there's a document that people keep downloading, that's another way for us to follow up with you. So again, all of these are different ways that we can measure things, but it's important to think about what we're going to do after the fact so that we don't just have that raw number reported out and have a group of people who maybe haven't seen virtual numbers before say, well, what's next? We're trying to think through that with you, make sure you're ready for that next step.
Julia is going to help us with another poll question, and we're curious, are you feeling a heightened level of awareness or scrutiny for measuring the results of a potential virtual event compared to in-person events? So again, virtual versus organizational pressure to measure that maybe has always been there. Is it higher this year? Is it about the same? or is it less than prior years? Curious where things are at. Julia, give us a sense of kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, definitely higher this year. I think with, virtual events being new to many people, leadership teams are asking about, the value and the results, and we're seeing that significantly jump ahead. Only about 2%, 2-3% said it's less than previous years. So definitely higher this year is quite significant. And about a quarter of you said it's about the same.
Got it. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, that's interesting and certainly not surprising. I think anytime you invest in something new, you want to get a sense of how do you measure it so that you can manage it. So Charlie talked a lot about what to measure tactically. I'm going to talk about how you go about measuring it, both from like a tactical standpoint with Google Analytics, but then also taking a step back and thinking about all the measurement tools that you might have at your disposal through your company's digital setup. So I covered this setup at one of my earlier sessions, and I think it's key for someone to think about, okay, how are you going to measure virtual experiences? Take a big step back and think about your company's entire marketing communications tech stack. And that kind of comes in three platforms or three categories. One is site and content analytics. And if you already, your company has a website or a product website, visitors, audience demographics, engagement metrics, those are things that will kind of cue you into the things that you can measure. Marketing automation gets into platforms like HubSpot, like we use, or maybe it's Eloqua. And that gives you a sense of, okay, this virtual experience that I'm building, how does it relate to leads? And how do I fit that into the way I already track leads so that I can compare this apples to apples to other forms of face-to-face marketing in terms of, okay, doing it this way gave me X percentage ROI or X number of leads, and we're capturing it in the same place. And then thinking through just how to qualify or unqualify a lead. If you sell through a direct sales channel, how do you assign that lead and what do you attribute its generation to? And then a CRM platform. So where do you keep your client and customer databases? Where do you pull that data from? Having these three categories of measurement information is critical in thinking through how it's developed into your virtual experience. One thing I wanted to spend some time on is Google Analytics. Certainly not a new platform, but it could be new to many of you who are in the event or exhibit management space and you're used to tracking like in-person leads. Google Analytics is a free platform. There is no subscription as a service model. You build it into the back end of your virtual or digital experience. And Google Analytics kind of serves up the marketing science of what's called SEO, search engine optimization. And that is a art and science in the marketing toolbook that is a career or discipline in and of itself. But one thing that we did want to link out to is kind of a beginner's guide to understanding Google Analytics. This particular article was done by a thought leader in the SEO space named Neil Patel, how to get actionable data from Google Analytics in 10 minutes. And just kind of walks you through at a high level, even if search engine optimization isn't your core responsibility, you can begin to kind of connect the dots on, okay, this is what I need to know, or this is what I need to program for my virtual experience. We're going to show just a quick sample again. You may have seen this in the keynote. This is an example of a live stream event that we did for our client Accuray. Again, they were looking to launch a product at a show. That show didn't happen. So they did what they called Accuray TV. They had their chief commercial officer talk through the products. They interviewed a couple of their key opinion leaders, surgical physicians that demonstrated their equipment. It was key to us and our client to understand, okay, if we're going to put the budget that necessitates this type of production value, this type of scripting for our CCO and putting them in front of our core audiences and clients, how are we moving the needle? What difference does it make? And so we wanted to share with you how we built the Google Analytics dashboard for Accuray. And this is a pretty basic look. We didn't want to get into the specifics of things, But you can kind of see the blip in traffic from the time it launched to a peak about midway through the broadcast and then ending around noon their time. Google Analytics can show you things like the number of users on your platform, how many page views you're getting, how many pages per session. So are they not only tuning into what we ask them to tune in for, but are they looking at other places on the website? How long are they doing it in terms of duration, and then bounce rates? If you're a domestic product or if you have a global audience, you can track by country or by state where your audience is coming from. And as this pertains to Accuray, we had a full Google Analytics report through an API key and it exported that to their client website. So we exceeded client attendance estimates by about 90%. So certainly a happy client in terms of raw attendance. And a big part of this is collaboration. You know, in this particular case, Accuray launched CyberKnife. This was a new product. Anytime you launch a new product, there could be questions. So curious, we wanted to track like how many questions. We fielded 56 questions in real time as that live stream event was broadcasting. Just a quick look at measurement. Massimo just launched. We're not really in a position to share metrics, but I did want to show through the demo video, you know, how you can specifically see how we program in measurement opportunities. So as you see the cursor move around, you're seeing these clickable bits of content that pop up. Maybe it's a video, repurposed video from their YouTube page. It's pre-programmed and scripted copy. You'll see here in just a second, we actually have lead input, which is what you're seeing now. Those are all things that we can be tracking and then report out on afterwards. So obviously content is king. That has to be perfect. You know, if people aren't having a great experience and they're not engaged by the content and experience itself, metrics don't matter. But we also want to be measuring how they're interacting with those engagements. And this is an example of kind of how we built that into the experience. So again, just be thinking through the entire prism of our infinity loop, whether it's virtual, whether it's live, whether it's a hybrid of in between, there's always something that we can be measuring. An old Peter Drucker quote, you know, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And we certainly subscribe to that theory. So just some essential takeaways before we get into 5 minutes or so of Q&A. Number one, think about how to get consensus among organization decision makers, measure that success in advance, benchmark, and track it. So an example of this, you know, for Massimo, we weren't just working with our corporate marketing clients, we were also working with their digital and IT departments. So getting consensus across the company is certainly the case with virtual products. Number two, balance the boost and reach with the relative impact of digital engagement. So again, a big pro is the boost we get in reach. We're reaching more people by volume. The con, or why we want to all get back to face-to-face at some point, is maybe that's not as impactful. So reach is a pro, but then also be sure to kind of preserve the value we get from face-to-face. We believe there's really no replacing it, and obviously our clients do as well. Work within the framework of traditional digital metrics, such as Google Analytics. Again, GA might not be something that you think about when you're going through the muscle memory of going to show or launching an event. Something to be thinking about first things first when you're developing a virtual experience. And then lastly, think about virtual experiences long-term and programmatically beyond one window of time. So you may have heard me speak to this in prior sessions. The impetus or the trigger to consider something might be one show canceling or going virtual, but we have an entire trade show and event schedule. So we want to think about how we do that across multiple touch points, not necessarily just one show. A quick plug into the last session of our Stay in the Loop event. Following Adam and I's keynote, we were in these vMeet sessions. That's what we're in now. We're going to jump back into that, what we call general session live stream broadcast. And we're actually going to dig into the platform itself. You know, how we developed today's Stay in the Loop event is just one way to do it. The left-hand navigation bar, and we're really going to explore what's possible with a lot of different client examples, particularly those of you that are interested in, okay, what does a expo or exhibit hall tab look like within this platform? So that is what's next. Contact information for Charlie and I for any Q&A we don't get to in the next 3 or 4 minutes. feel free to email us for questions on measurement. So with that, Julia, feel free to start with any questions we've received.
Hi, I have two really good questions that I thought I'd bring up that were from the chat feature. Both Keely and Cindy asked, I think it's a really good question. How do you collect metrics from a virtual trade show environment when you're working with 25 to 50 virtual events platforms? So for example, you're working with an association, I think this is what they're asking, that uses a virtual platform, and then you go to another show that's using another platform. How do you use that measure, or how do you measure across them all? So that's the first question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, in many cases, there's really no avoiding that. Whether it's a session that you would do with us, whether it's maybe it's a trade show that went virtual that you're working with us on your experience, but a competitor or the general contractor is controlling the association side of it, and they're using a different platform. So there's no getting around the problem. But what I would say to answer your question is every platform is going to be tracking some of the main things that Charlie and I talked about. How that's exported, Google Analytics, a raw Excel CSV file, that may all be different. But what I would look to do, especially before you sign the dotted line on a sponsorship package, is be clear for the things that you're looking to measure so that you can back the investment within that virtual show, knowing that it might be different show to show or event to event.
Yeah, to add on to that a little bit, ask how they're going to deliver it to you. Make sure you can get full sets of data, not just a summary report, because the full set will help you a lot more. That'll help you do things like look at demographic information, look at percentages based on the scale of a show. And then the last thing I would say is you might not be able to get your full wish list of somebody measuring every single thing you want, but make sure there are 2 to 3 things that you hold dear, those call to actions, whether that's watching a particular video, doing a particular demo, signing up as part of a lead thing, as we saw with Massimo, whatever those key ones are, make sure you have some way of measuring that so that you're having this one common thread to look at your entire experience for a whole year.
Cool, thanks guys. If we have time for one more question, on a similar note, Lisa asked, are you seeing associations effectively driving traffic to virtual exhibits, or do you feel it is really on the exhibitor to drive the traffic? I think I saw this in a separate section chat as well, so I think this is very top of mind right now. What's the balance? How do you hold the associations accountable? How do you take ownership of it yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one we fielded a couple of times over the last few months. To put the question another way, if I'm an exhibitor and I'm not going to show in real life, the association is offering me a virtual exhibit package, what we might call a virtual environment. Like, what's in it for me, and how do I know attendees are going to go there? So I'll answer it kind of on both sides of the fence. The associations work with a company like us to think about how do we make that expo or exhibit hall as interesting and dynamic as possible so that we get traffic there, so that we're giving our exhibitors value on their sponsorship package. Ways we've done that, trying to lace in maybe digital Easter egg hunts where we're kind of making sure people at least check in on each one, so that if they're competing for a prize or maybe it's part of the continuing education curriculum, that they're impelled to go to each of these exhibits. And then on the other side, as an exhibitor, let's say the association provides ample data or suggestions on, okay, here's why people will be going to your virtual exhibit within our show. Just like you would in real life exhibit, you're going to want to make it as dynamic and interesting as possible. And anything you can do to create something that they can't get anywhere else, kind of incorporate a level of exclusivity is going to help. We've had clients that maybe it's budget pressure, they're kind of in a bind. They just repurpose a rendering and existing content, and that's fine. It's certainly better than nothing, one being better than zero. But to the spirit of the question, like, how do you make this engagement like special? It's creating something new and something that's new and dynamic to something that they can't get anywhere else.
Those were the questions we had from the group. So thanks for everyone that submitted them, and thanks Rick and Charlie.
Yeah, looks like we're just a minute over. So again, everyone feel free to go to their event schedule, join the general session where Kyle Morris and I will run you through different ways we can develop this platform. Thank you very much.